All right, welcome to Double Fries No Slaw, the morning show presented by Decadent, a coffee and dessert bar. We'll give them some love in a little bit, as well as give BetUS some love here in a moment too. I'll let some people get in here, but honestly, want to make this a 100% like call in and comment type show. So anything you guys ask, want to talk about, want to bring up, I'm here for it. Last week had the flu, missed last week, so we've got 2 weeks of stuff to talk about. Although things feel pretty slow around FSU right now, it is, obviously they're still recruiting a couple of 25 kids, and you got Crow's son to commit yesterday, which we'll talk about, or last night. But, and obviously they're not done in 25, but it does feel like they've, the bulk of the focus is moved past the portal, past 25 into 26. And I'll tell you, I'm a little bit beat down right now. I don't know if I'm fully ready to commit to 2026 recruiting, but at the end of the day, that's where we are. And so that's what we're going to do. But man, there feels like there's so much uncertainty just with everything around FSU, and obviously feel like we're in a better spot now, but the idea of the long grind of another recruiting class when you just don't know like what's coming on the field this year feels daunting, but at least we just get to talk about it, and our jobs and lives don't depend on it. So I guess it's harder for them than it is for us. But yeah, hit the comments. There is a call-in link available. We'll throw that in the comments, that if you want to call in and you want to talk some crap or you have questions, we can talk about that. Some big moves in the ACC. Obviously, Florida State able to wrap up their coaching staff faster, but Miami makes a big change at defensive coordinator. Clemson makes a big change at defensive coordinator. I'll tell you, I was really praying on Clemson's downfall. I know we've got a lot of Clemson folks that watch this and tune in, so don't hate me for saying that, but that's just kind of what you do when there's a top dog in your conference, and it's a pretty clear top dog. Clemson didn't even have a good year this year, still wins the ACC. I really like Tom Allen. I really think he's good, and I think that's a great hire by Clemson. I'll talk about that more on the national channel at some point this week, but I think they did a really good job with the hire of Tom Allen. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about the Minnesota guy. I know that Minnesota's always got great defense because they play in the Big Ten. So, I mean, whatever. I don't have any takes on Miami's guy, but I think Clemson's legit. They're my pick to win the ACC this early in the year. Hopefully, Castellanos can give them some fits, but I think Clemson's going to be really good. I think Cade Klubnik is the most undervalued. I know nobody tuned in to listen to Clemson, propaganda. I think Cade Klubnik's the most undervalued quarterback in the draft next year. Like, I think with a really good year, he could go number one. Is that a hot take? Is that crazy? I know people are excited about Drew Aller. I know that Garrett Nussmeier's name is up there. I know that there are others, Carson Beck at Miami. I know there's others guys that are going to be potentials, but I think Cade has a great chance to put up insane numbers and go first overall. We'll see. Decadent, a coffee and dessert bar. Somebody told me we should do ads earlier in the show. That way it doesn't break stuff up. So here we are doing that. Decadent, a coffee and dessert bar. If you are in Fulton, Maryland, if you're in Warner Robins, Georgia, or Modesto, California, make sure that you're stopping by and seeing them. Let them know that we sent you. And then again, a new location coming in the state of Florida. I don't know if I'm allowed to say exactly where yet, but excited about that. And hopefully we'll do like a live show from there. That'd be really cool. Modesto, California, obviously up in kind of the central part of California. But if anybody's up at 6 a.m. watching from California or watching on the replay, obviously we're thinking about you, as the wildfire stuff is absolutely insane right now and scary to even think about. So anyway, all right, let's roll with some stuff. Antonio Cromartie Jr. commits to the Seminoles in a move that was probably possible either way, but a really cool move by Florida State. Like, Crow Jr. rated a 3-star on 3 and on Rivals, not rated on the other two sites. But I don't know if they're able to offer him a scholarship in past seasons when the scholarship limits were down at 85. It's actually kind of funny is the NCAA punishes FSU by taking away some scholarships, and then they increase everybody's up to like 105, and a lot of rosters won't even get up to 105, and so it kind of undoes that punishment. Obviously, that punishment doesn't really matter a ton with NIL anyway. There were some guys on the roster last year because we were over the limit that just weren't on scholarship and were being NIL'd through school. So that's fine. But a cool move, where Florida State's able to offer a scholarship, and then who knows, like how he develops in a couple of years. But a really cool move for Florida State to bring him in and allow him to be part of the roster, the program, the class. Obviously kind of a dream come true for a kid that grew up. I don't know if you saw it or not, but I tweeted the picture that his mom posted on Instagram of him and Coach Bowden when he was a kid. And, I don't think we really get, I mean, we certainly got emotional last year with the snub and stuff, but I don't really get emotional a ton. But I just looking at that picture of Coach Bowden, I really just sat there last night and was thinking like, man, I really miss him. Not that we had some kind of a relationship, like, yeah, we weren't like close or anything, but just, I don't know, like his personality and like who he was and what he stood for and stuff. Like I was literally sitting there watching, Monday Night Football, getting emotional, thinking, man, I sure wish Coach Bowden was back, which I feel like I could talk about Coach Bowden forever. And that's not necessarily why anybody tuned in, but it was just cool to kind of like look back and see, and people were commenting and talking about like how cool it would have been if he could have seen this. And we wouldn't be doing this show. You wouldn't be tuned in at 9 a.m. listening to me ramble about FSU if it wasn't for Coach Bowden, obviously. And so a cool kind of full circle moment, I'm sure, for their family and for really anybody that played with Crow or came after Crow. I mean, part of the DB legacy at FSU. Kind of cool to think about and see that kind of stuff too. But a cool move for Florida State. And, I'm not going to pretend like I think that the kid's going to come in and, light things up for you in year one or year two, but we'll see how development goes and we'll see how things kind of pan out, and a really cool legacy to continue. Obviously all the Crow jokes were great. Hey, he's got a million kids. And so, one of them's got to hit. So start the legacy now. You should have about 10 more years of having Cromarties on your roster if you can continue to recruit them well. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But Florida State not done at the high school level. And 25, sounds like decisions coming from the FIU commit at center, which if Florida State could flip him, which I think they should be able to. If they push there, that would be one that surprises me. If they don't flip him, would be pretty cool to continue to add to the roster in that way as well. And then it's on to 26. This is a good question. We'll go through some comments here if anybody wants to chime in. But what are your expectations for 26 recruiting? I didn't even really talk about that. But you think about it, Florida State recruited like the 19th or 20th best class with 2 wins, right? And honestly, maybe their most impressive, this is kind of crazy to think about, maybe their most impressive class yet, not their best class, right? Like they were up closer to 10 after the 13-0 season. But maybe the most impressive class when you think about the fact that you recruited in the top 20 having 2 wins. Like what did you really have to sell outside of playing time in NIL? You certainly didn't have any kind of stability to sell. You don't have, it's still Florida State, but with how poorly the season went, I mean, you look at Miami recruiting like a top 15-ish class, and you recruited a top 20 class, having 8 less wins. I think that's pretty impressive, but what are your expectations for next year's class, right? Obviously, that'll have something to do with how well they play on the field. And without going through a full schedule breakdown, which we certainly could look at it if nobody says anything and we run out of things to talk about this morning. But if the team was to win, let's say 7 games, like I think when the Vegas over-under comes out, I think they're going to set Florida State's win total at about 6.5. That's just my guess. That's just looking at the schedule, knowing there are some really tough games in there, knowing that there are more gimmies in the schedule. I think they're going to set it at 6.5. So if you can slightly overachieve or just get on the plus side of that and get to 7 wins, all right? Nobody's super thrilled with 7, but after 2, 7's certainly better than where we've been. What are the expectations for the class? Like, can they actually put together a really solid class and get up close to 10th? Can they, that would be the absolute ceiling to me. It would surprise me, I think, if they got up over 10th. But I feel like 15th is probably doable. Like if you just win a few more games this year, you probably finish around 15th. If you go 6-6, I think you can probably finish around 15th. What are your expectations for the 26 class? How good of a job can this new staff do in building that? We saw, and I hate to give them credit for stuff, but we did see Napier and Cristobal recruit very well for their records their first 2 years. And winning and losing does matter, there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, recruiters recruit. And if you put effort forth and you put an emphasis on it, which I guess that's the big thing, is will Florida State put an emphasis on it? Will they put an emphasis and an expectation on finishing? there's a false narrative that Florida State just doesn't care about recruiting and they just want to grab guys out of the portal. And I don't believe that. I've never bought that. I don't think you spend time trying to recruit Jeremiah Smith and LJ McCray and, Armando Blunt and all these guys that you didn't end up getting, KJ Bolden. I don't think you're putting that kind of effort into it. I don't think you're targeting those guys if you just don't care about it. I just don't think they were very good at it. And so what is the expectation for the 26 class? To me, it feels like it's got to get somewhere around the top 10 to 15. If you're not doing that, I just don't know how Mike ends up lasting here. And I think Mike's got an uphill battle anyway. But what are your thoughts there? What are your expectations for that? Somebody told me the other day I should mute while I take a sip of drink because it's too loud into the mic. I just don't know if I have enough patience to actually hit the mute button every single time that I take a sip of coffee, but here we are. We've gotten questions on Ty Haywood. I don't really feel good about Florida State's chances there. I did see he decommitted from Alabama. I think the Alabama scenario right now is fascinating to watch because obviously they're not going to be happy with anything but SEC championships and playoff appearances and then playoff wins too. And I just don't know that that's going to continue to happen. But we've gotten that question a few times. And so just quickly on Ty Haywood, I don't really feel great there. On next year, on the 26th season, 6.5 wins. Does that sound about right? FSU 2025 football schedule. If you look at the football schedule right now and you just got to pick wins and losses early, which ones are you picking as wins and losses? Well, I'll tell you right now, I haven't seen enough from this team just through the portal to predict that any of the top 4 games are wins. Just being very frank. Alabama, Florida, Clemson, and Miami. Like there's nothing that we've done that would say that we beat any of those teams. Now, could Florida underwhelm? Absolutely. Could Miami underwhelm? Absolutely. Alabama's not a guaranteed loss. Clemson, to me, kind of on the road, feels pretty guaranteed at this point. But I think Florida State will play better in those, but I think it'd be pretty tough to say that any of those are definite wins. But I do think there are a lot more wins on the schedule just looking at it early. We actually have a video coming out later today where Richie and I talk about this a little bit more in depth. But you do pick up an extra win because you play East Texas and Kent State as opposed to playing Memphis this year. And then you play a bunch of bottom feeders in the ACC. And Florida State was the bottom of the ACC this year. But you play a lot more teams that were similar to that in Wake, Stanford, Virginia Tech. Pittsburgh lost 6 games to finish the year this year. NC State absolutely hates the spot that they're in, and they're calling for Doran's head. He's maybe on the hot seat going into this year. And so I think you do have a lot more opportunity to get wins this year. 6.5, do you like that number? You think that's too high, too low? If they were to miss a bowl, all right, let's not even talk about that. If they were to miss a bowl, I think we would move on. I think that would be the end of that. I think that'd be the end of the era, right? That's where we would just say, we're out of here. What are your thoughts on the national championship? Does anybody even care? Does it feel like the playoffs have lasted forever? Does it feel like that is just too much? I'm never going to complain about more college football, but once you get in the second round of the NFL, like we're going to be done with 2 rounds of NFL playoffs. Like we're going to know the AFC, NFC championship matchups, and we're still not going to be done with college football. That feels a little bit delayed. It feels a little bit spread out. I wish they could figure out a way to wrap this thing up a little bit sooner. Do you think Ohio State just blows Notre Dame out? I've noticed the spreads moved a little bit. Just quickly, obviously, if you're betting on that spread, you can do that with our friends over at BetUS. YouTube 150 gets you 150% bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next 2. Appreciate BetUS for their support. Make sure you're betting with them if you do bet on the national championship this year. But do you have thoughts on who wins that? Who comes out on top? Does it matter? Obviously, it doesn't matter for Florida State. But Notre Dame, any chance to pull an upset? Any chance to jump back into things? Jump back into, when was the last time they won? Was it 91? 1991 National Championship football. 92, Alabama won. No, Miami won in 91. When was the last time Notre Dame won? Colorado won in 90. Was it 89? 89, Michigan won. I don't know. So it's been a long time. Notre Dame won in 88. Do you have a preference there? Do you care who wins that? I'd probably rather see the upset. Marcus Freeman's pretty likable. I like the Marcus Freeman LSU. I like the Marcus Freeman Brian Kelly debate talk that's going on right now. But back to Florida State, since we've rambled a little bit and talked about things that weren't Florida State. Expectations for next year. Is it too soon to talk about that? How much does the spring matter? How much does more in the portal matter? I think your floor has to be 6-6. If you don't get to 6-6, obviously it's a problem then. If you can somehow get to 8, I think we would. Would you do backflips for 8? Like with that kind of a turnaround, with a 400% increase from last year, would that do something for you? Let's look at a comment or two here. Appalachicola 05, good morning. Go Noles. Hunter. Like a Hunter, man. Skipping work to be tuned in. Defense will probably keep them in for a bit. Notre Dame won't have the offense to keep up, though. That is what I worry about. Although Notre Dame's offense, did they figure something out in that fourth quarter against Penn State? Because it kind of felt like they did. Dude, it is way too hot in here. I just felt like the heat kick on, and we're going no jacket. Did they figure out something offensively in the fourth quarter against Penn State? Where they scored, 20? Did they score 24? 21 points in the fourth quarter? No, 24. They had the field goal. My biggest problem is I don't think their defense can play man. I don't think their defense can play man against Ohio State's wide receivers. And they haven't played zone all year. And so can they figure that out in 1 week or 10 days, whatever the difference has been. Expectations for next year, undefeated, winning every game. Listen, I don't know that I'm ready quite yet to lie for the team just yet on that. But if they were to beat Bama week 1, and I know that's probably a long shot, I think Alabama's going to be more than a touchdown favorite. Is that insane? Is that insane to already kind of put us down by that much? I wish there was an early line on that game. But I think Alabama's going to be more than a touchdown favorite. And I think Florida State will cover. But if they were to win that game, if they were to somehow beat Alabama, and I know that Alabama's not the Alabama of old. When was the last time Bama won a non-list of football champions? When was the last time they won a non-COVID championship? Obviously, they won in 2020. Not to take that away, Bama fans will get upset if you start to talk about the fact that that was a COVID year. But I feel like all the COVID champions you kind of look at and you say not sure if I'm buying this. 2017 was their last non-COVID championship. So it's been 8 years by the time we get around to next season. Can they upset them? If they were to knock off Bama in week 1, that's where I think the line would actually start. I think that'll be an easy win. What did you put in your coffee this morning is probably the better question for Appalachicola. Hunter, I don't know if you're still in here, Appalachicola. I don't know if you're still in here. I have thoughts on this. I asked Richie about this. What are your thoughts on what you think Florida State still needs to add in the portal? Are you happy with the portal class? I think it addressed a lot of needs. I think the offensive line certainly improved phenomenally. But what are your thoughts on what they need to add? I still don't feel super confident in the defensive line. That's probably my biggest question. I think they could use safety help. I would love another wide receiver that's just like a baller. I don't think there's a guy out there, but you certainly should be tampering right now and trying to get guys to jump in the spring window. How much can your offense really sell that you're going to throw the ball a lot? Obviously, it feels like it's going to be a pretty run-heavy offense with your running back room and Castellanos. But how much can you sell potentially another wide receiver to come? I think that was easy in 2023 when you had Jordan Travis, and that's why you were able to go out and get Keon. But can you add more to that room to help your offense a little bit? But again, the defensive line is probably the room that I have the most questions about. I think safety room's a little bit of a question too, but I do think that they'll be able to coach up some safeties and maybe move some guys around. And I know they like their young talent a lot. How well has that been developed? I guess we'll find out. But the defensive line, I like James Williams a lot. I like that you got Daryl Jackson back a lot. I think that Wynn will come in and make an impact. Maybe not week 1 or anything. But the defensive line certainly is kind of where I'm at and thinking that needs to improve. What about kicker punter? So obviously you lose Fitzgerald and Mastromano. I don't have a great answer on punter. Harlan, who's playing punter? Who's kicking this year at punter behind Mastromano? I do know, didn't you sign Weinberg though? Wasn't he the number 1 overall kicker last year? I think they feel pretty good about kicker. In fact, he even got in, I think, late and kicked a little bit for you, in games that didn't really matter, but he kicked some against Chattanooga. Like, I feel pretty good about kicker. All of that is mental anyway. But you are losing the best punter in the country, which is kind of frustrating. Probably your best player this year. Oh, which is pretty terrible to think about. I don't know on special teams. Could they hear you say that, or do I need to say it? Ethan Post, is that what you said? Bruno Roos, and Ethan Post. I don't know, man. I'm sorry for not knowing the punters on this team. Maybe that makes me a bad fan. But I would think that punting, I don't know. I don't want to say it takes a step back. Hopefully you don't need to punt as much this year. Would that be an idea? I watched the Bucks game the other day, and they didn't make those suckers punt one time. So if you just do that, if your defense if your offense can just keep the other team from ever forcing a punt, that'd be ideal. I don't have a lot of confidence in that happen. Listen, the GOAT down here says we're beating Bama too. Maybe I'm underselling the team a little bit. Is there an early line somewhere on that? Early line FSU Alabama 2025. No, I don't have anything there. Who's their quarterback? They have a young guy that they're starting. Obviously, Milroe gone. I would have probably rather Milroe still been. But with our jobs against running quarterbacks, maybe not. Maybe I don't want that. Again, if they beat Bama to start this thing off, that's kind of what it all comes down to. Feel better about offensive line. I would have really liked Faison, but I like the running backs. What are your expectations for Castellanos? How good do you think he can actually be this year? What grade would you give that pickup? Now the dust is settled. You obviously lose Kromenhoek. You get Castellanos. I don't know that hurts you for this year. Obviously, you would have hoped that Luke would be something in the future. Do you think he stays at Mississippi State? Do you think that's a real thing? Do you think that's really where he ends up? Because what I wonder about is if he transfers a third time or a second time, if he's at his third program, is he really going to be like that? Who's the most successful quarterback that ever transferred twice? Went to 2 different schools. If he would have ended up at a Georgia or something, I'd feel a little bit different. But going to Mississippi State, man, kind of makes me think that Florida State maybe made the right decision there. As much as we hated that when it happened, kind of makes me think maybe we came out on the right side of things. Morgan's got a stat line for Castellanos, 29 total touchdowns. So I guess that's running and passing, and 7 interceptions. Obviously, that'd be a massive pick. That'd be a massive upgrade. You're talking about 2.5 per game. If he accounts for 2.5 a game and then he has an interception every other game, that's pretty good. If you can get Castellanos just to not lose you games, right? There are games that Florida State on this schedule should absolutely win. We talked about the schedule a second ago. You obviously win the 2 gimmies against Kent State and East Texas. You absolutely should beat Stanford, Virginia, Wake Forest. Can you split with Virginia Tech and Pitt? Both those games are at home. If you were to split with both those teams, you're looking at 6 wins. And then if you beat anyone else, you beat Virginia, can you beat both those teams at home in Doak? You beat Pitt and Virginia Tech, then you're looking at 7. And if you upset anybody along the way, Can you upset a Florida or a Miami or a Bama to start the year? You're looking at 8. I think the path is pretty tough to think that you could do that. Cam Newton transferred twice. Where was he at before Florida? Florida to okay. That's. I don't know if that's quite the same. Boy, I'm glad he left Florida. But yeah, I guess it's possible. Off topic, but I hear a lot of people say that NIL has destroyed college football, but the issue is not NIL. The issue is the transfer portal solution, no transferring with some exceptions. What I would like to see, Morgan, or I'm sorry, that was Nick. What I would like to see with the transfer portal and maybe with this new revenue sharing is guys get kind of locked into longer contracts. Because I agree with you. I think that it's asinine that it is just brand new rosters every year. And we're in this flux situation within college football to where the players' rights. And it just makes the sport somewhat untenable, right? Like, it's dumb because even coaches, the coach can leave, the coach can go every year, he can get a new job. Not really. Right? Like we've seen coaches go from year to year to year, but it very much is the exception. Like you think about Taggart going from USF to Oregon, back to Florida State, all kind of in a 3-year span. Yeah, I guess that's possible. It happens, but it's not the regular, right? That's not the norm. You're using kind of an exception to the rule to prove your point. And when those things happen, like Oregon had to pay a buyout to USF and Florida State had to pay a buyout to Oregon for him to leave. And so what I would like to see is and maybe programs would just do it, but if you want to get a transfer, you have to pay like some kind of a buyout to the other collective, right? If you're on a 3-year deal with Florida State and you want to leave, you can leave, but the next collective, the next program, the next university has to then buy you out. And I think if that was part of the deal, to where there was some kind of a penalty, I don't think these schools are going to want to pay each other for this. And so, I mean, what they need to do is they need to make these kids employees like the NFL does to where they're under contract for X number of years and it hits against your salary cap, whether you release them or not. You have to get your high school evaluations right. And we limit the way that this portal crap works because it is stupid. And Florida State has lived in the portal and it has served them really well at times and it has absolutely killed them at times. But it is dumb. Like the sport right now is dumb. And I agree. I don't really think that NIL is the problem. I think it is more the portal. I think it's more the jumping from school to school to school. When you see these graphics that On3 puts out or whatever, and they've got 6 schools on the bottom of it because they've transferred literally more times than they've actually laced up their cleats, that's stupid. Like what kind of sport are we really doing here? I'd love a 2-year contract to start it out. I mean, I'd like 3. 2-year contract for all incoming freshmen allows them to renegotiate for more money if they earn it after 2 years and allows the program more stability to build their ability to build their roster. Yeah, I mean, it's dumb right now, and I'm all for, the players' rights, this, that, and the other, whatever, It also would probably help out some of your smaller schools. It probably would help out some of your schools that are just getting rated every single year by the big boys. I don't know. It's dumb right now that we're into it. I've seen people like arguing for it. Like, it keeps the uniqueness and the freshness of who wants that, right? Like, I don't even think do you even care about, I don't even think people care about players like they used to. Now, certainly at some of the bigger schools, like, you've got players that are going to be there several years and you're going to love that. But Florida State's entire roster, deservedly so, is going to be different this year than it was last year. Like, what's even the point? Like, you remember like Florida State legends that you're happy about Crow's son committing because you remember Cromartie and then what he did in the NFL because he spent all his time in Tallahassee. Like I just don't think you're going to have stories like that anymore. Certainly you'll have some, not to say every kid is the same on this, but yeah, it's just dumb. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me the way that we do this. And hopefully it changes. Hopefully it gets a little bit better. But I agree. It's an unrecognizable sport. You think about even and it happens to good teams too. Like good teams just flip their rosters too. And At the end of the day, I think there have always been kids that like cared more about the program than cared more about themselves or just whatever the situation was. It's, every individual is different. But for the most part now, it just very much feels like, we're just here to kind of do a job. Like, I feel like Baker Mayfield cares more about playing for the Bucs than most of the kids in college football care about playing for wherever they're at. And they don't have to care. Like, I don't care, right? They don't have to care. They don't have to bleed garnet and gold or orange and blue or scarlet and gray or whatever. That doesn't matter. But just, there is no loyalty. And so there needs to be loyalty forced, right? Just like the NFL, just like everywhere else, there need to be contracts. There need to be longer stipulations for staying in school. And what will that mean for a program? There's pros and cons to that. Number one, the pro is you have the ability to develop and not worry about your guys jumping in the portal and being held hostage over money. There are some certain pros to that. There are also cons to that. You can't just take these 3-star projects that are not going to work out, but you're just kind of filling out roster space because you can. Because you're stuck with that kid. You can't take the 3-star linebacker that was a Randy Shannon special knowing that he's never going to play for you because he's stuck on your roster for 3 or 4 years. So it forces you to be a little bit better with your recruiting too. I think there are pros and cons, but it certainly does need to be fixed. So, all right, quick show today. Quick 30-minute thoughts. You catch this on replay. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Appreciate Decadent, a coffee and dessert bar again. Appreciate BetUS for their support. Just wanted to get on here and talk about Crow's Son real quick and then answer some questions in the comments. I know it's the off season. I know we've got less people. I know this isn't as long, but we still went over 30 minutes of just straight rambling. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll be better next week. We'll have a longer show, I'm sure. We'll have more stuff kind of popping off. I expect Florida State to maybe pick up another 25 recruit this week, and then we'll see if anything else pops off in the portal. If not, it's time to start looking at the 2025 roster. So we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, a quick one today, but we'll talk to you guys soon. Go Noles.